These are interesting times for reporters and investigative journalists. So I was intrigued to learn that Mamaroneck High School seniors in Evan Madin's journalism class are taking on serious investigative reporting assignments in their own community. I'm eager to hear about those projects and what the students have learned about their subject and about the craft of journalism. So stay with us for a stimulating conversation with teacher Evan Madin and Mamaroneck High seniors Jared Freifeld, Rena Miller, and Julia Sicklick. Their investigative subjects are, respectively, is extra time on exams a level playing field? Are teen athletes standing for the national anthem? And is bullying happening at the Hommocks Middle School? I'm Alice Bloom. This is A Town and Village 2. Welcome back. Let me introduce my guests. Evan Madin, journalism teacher at Mamaroneck High School. Jared Freifeld, senior, we're all seniors, okay? Rena Miller and Julia Sicklick. Welcome to all of you. I am so intrigued about what you're doing. Evan, I'm going to start with a question to you. Sure. What's the difference between a plain old reporter and an investigative reporter?
Well, it's funny, the projects that we're working on started from the viewing of the film Spotlight, which came out last year, about the Boston Globe investigations of the sex scandals with priests, etc. But investigative journalism is the idea that a newspaper, theoretically, mostly newspapers, will spend a large amount of money in their budget to invest in a particular issue that the paper wants to look deeply at. And in investigating it with not only the extra finance, but the extra time, you set a group of reporters together and you look real deep and you dig deep in the sense even beyond the internet age to look for what a topic is, to look deeper at why that topic matters, and to investigate more about deep questions that people have on the topic itself.
Okay, and a regular reporter?
A regular reporter, is doing daily reporting, but this takes much longer time.
Just reporting back what's happening, what someone
Correct.
said, what happened today.
Correct.
Okay, not looking into it. Now, you raised a very interesting point, and that was the issue that before the internet, as the
Right.
reporters in Spotlight did not even have an Excel spreadsheet. They simply crafted their own sheet or chart to explore where priests were being transferred, right? So you don't have to have those tools, but they certainly help.
Well, actually, it's changed so much reporting in that way too, right? Because it's almost like we have so much information, it's hard to disseminate or figure out what that information is or how to look through all that information. Again, Spotlight was more analog. People didn't have all the digital resources that we have now. So it's interesting to put the students in this position now where you have all this info to figure out one thing where you can really micro attack and look at a particular issue and figure out what the truth is.
Well, I want to talk about the substance of it, and I also want to talk about the actual reporting. I mean, we all think of reporters and investigative reporters with a notebook. Do you guys carry a notebook? A pen and pencil?
Only in class.
Only in class. How do you take notes when you interview people? Jared?
Well, we record all of our interviews.
You
so
do?
First off, we ask them if it's okay to record the interview. But besides that, we have questions that we're going to ask them, and then we'll sometimes go off track, but we'll take notes and things we think are noteworthy.
Notes with a pen and paper?
Yeah, pen and paper.
Okay.
Because I think it's more important to write down exactly what time they said something or like something very important or specific they said. So.
Okay. All right, let's start. I'm fascinated with the subjects you chose. First of all, do I assume you all chose the subjects that you are investigating?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so they piqued your interest. Julia, let's talk about yours first. That's bullying at the Hommocks Middle School. Now, middle schools are notorious for some bad behavior. What made you choose the subject?
Well, the actual first part of it was Mr. Madin sent me and my partner on the project Jordan an article from News 12 about bullying in Lower Hudson Valley schools, and one of them was Hammocks. And since we both went there, we were kind of interested in that because if that was true, that's kind of a big deal for an accusation of bullying. So that's where it stemmed from. And then we went into talking to the district about whether or not the report was true and how accurate it was. So we talked to the superintendent and the woman who handles like public relations for the district. We talked to the Hommocks Middle School principal, and tomorrow we're talking to some of the guidance counselors about the subject as well.
Now, what's been the reaction of the people you're talking to?
Well, they have evidence that it's not true because, well, the whole reason the News 12 got that idea was there was an audit done by the state comptroller about the Department of Education, and one of the schools that was audited was the Hommocks Middle School. So they wrote up the report about it. The News 12 saw the report, saw Hommocks Middle School, saw that it had something to do with reporting bullying, and I think that's where all the information came from. But Dr. Schaps and Dr. Weitzman both said that it wasn't true, and there was no like explicit said that like Hommocks is bullying in the report.
Okay. Now, did you sense that they were trying to influence the result of your investigative report? They were trying to convince you that it's not a problem?
No, they just were like honest about what it wasn't like, I mean, their opinions weren't really in it, like they just had to tell us about the report mostly. So
Okay.
It wasn't really I think this or I think that. It was more like the report says this and this is what happened. If that makes sense.
Have you and your friends seen the film or read the book 13 Reasons Why?
Yeah, I've read the book and I watched
Okay.
the show.
Okay. How did that affect your work?
I've never really thought of that actually. I'm not sure. Well, I just don't see, I mean, when I was at the middle school and now after going through the high school, bullying's never been an issue of mine, like personally. I know it happens, but I don't know the extent of it or anything like that.
Okay. Because for anybody who hasn't seen that, of course, that was a very well done but very upsetting story of a young girl who was bullied, and the results, of course, are very, very sad. And I found when I raised it to people I know who teach, they were very upset and immediately became very defensive about how seriously they take bullying. Teachers and the administrations take bullying and they don't allow it to go ahead. And I had that experience with a friend who teaches advanced placement English, and I said, well, I never meant to accuse you of permitting it, but I just want to know what your take was on that. So was that more fabrication, or does that reflect what is really going on?
I think one of the reasons they probably got defensive is because the show itself shows like a neglectful teacher, I guess. That's probably why they got defensive about it, because I think most teachers aren't like that.
And that's great to hear, and so that your experience has been that people are taking bullying pretty seriously in the Mamaroneck School District. Okay, we're going to get back to that. There's lots more to talk about. Rena, your subject is about athletes standing for the national anthem.
Yeah.
Tell us more about that.
So through like anywhere from September up until November, everything in the news was like, who's bullying?
Well, we
Like
always hear
what
about that.
football teams are kneeling, like what players are standing versus kneeling with the rest of their teammates or even their coaches. So my partner and I, Karina, we were both kind of interested on how like the media was reporting on it, and we both like have our own opinions about like what kneeling is and who should do it. But a reason why we decided to kind of settle on that topic was because in our own school, like our football team, we never saw any kneeling, but I'm sure that other schools in the district and I guess all around Westchester, I'm sure there's some students who do kneel. So we wanted to kind of reach out to other students from other schools, like we were talking to New Rochelle kids about had they ever seen kneeling, like would they ever do it? So we took a poll with our own class and the results were kind of surprising.
What were the results?
So about 59% of the 80 kids that we got responses from said that they would kneel if given the chance. And then the rest were maybe, I don't know, like I don't really feel like I should do that. So it was kind of skewed. I thought it was going to be like, no way, I'm not going to kneel. But I think that definitely like, going through this investigative journalism project, we really did see like how opinions can differ based on like what school you go to or what sport you play. So I think that was really interesting and a reason why we wanted to go with the NFL kneeling.
Now you raised an interesting point, which was you had an opinion before you started your investigation. How, now everybody has opinions. I mean, we can't pretend that we don't, but how do you manage your prejudices, your biases, your feelings? How do you do that when you embark on an investigative report or the research for a report?
Yeah, so for me, I'm kind of stuck in my ways. And Mr. Madin knows that. I'm kind of, I know what I want. Like, I have very strong opinions. But going through it and talking to other people and seeing why they would do something different than I would kind of opened my eyes to like other views, which I never really would have thought of had I not asked other students.
So you were willing to modify your
Yeah.
feelings based upon what your research revealed.
Yeah, 100%.
So you weren't just going to prove your hypothesis.
No.
Okay.
In the most pleasant way possible, though, in class, I say a lot, no one really cares about your opinions, guys. I make
Yeah.
that very clear to them. Because they're reporters, right? If they spend every single day in our class writing about how they feel about things, they're just writing journal entries. The whole point of this is to find out how the world feels or how the community feels. That's a big difference, especially when you are a reporter versus when you're a student. So it's great. It takes them out of their comfort zone, too, in a good way.
Do you direct your students to watch people who purport to be investigative reporters to find the holes in their presentations?
Sure. I mean, I think we check out articles or we talk about things, and sometimes we'll ask them to, I'll show them how certain reporters have done things, or ask a question. Tom Price, for instance, I showed them an article just briefly about how some of the reporters from the Daily Beast or something, how they brought down that investigation or looked closely at that investigation, the amount of work and effort that went into it. So it's important to see how metacognitively, like a reporter works through a process, because that's what they're doing now.
So who do you tout to your students as fine investigative journalists?
That's a hard question. I like to show them that the classic newspapers do a very good job. Like, again, back to the Spotlight issue, the Boston Globe, they did a tremendous job. Granted, it took a lot of resources and time, but they did an amazing job at doing that. There are the Watergate investigation, other things that are happening now currently. We can look at a lot of different investigations, and they can see that this is a systematic thing. If they can understand that this takes a large amount of time and resources, then they know it's not something that you solve overnight.
What prejudices television to make it not perhaps the best source for your news, or certainly for the results of an investigative report?
You want to handle that?
The source of television? As
Yeah,
news?
go ahead.
Yeah.
The medium of television.
Right. Well, I think that television now is a lot of ratings. It's all about the ratings. So as long as they have stories that will find good ratings with the public and will beat out the other television stations and other media networks, then that's the story they're going to put on the air. So it might not be the investigative story that's going to take a long time. It's going to be the one that's directly affecting the public right now.
Okay.
So I think that's the problem with like TV media.
Do you ever think about corporate ownership of media?
Absolutely.
We did a whole chapter on that.
We talked about that,
Okay. Yeah. It can't, you have to look at it. Who owns it? Who could be influencing?
Actually, the money, where the money's coming from and where the funding is coming from, it definitely plays a huge role in the news that's getting put out.
What's put out and maybe what's not being put out?
Right.
Right. NBC is owned by who? We did that in class, right?
Something
Yeah.
to the GE.
If they
Oh,
own like a
GE.
bunch of other
GE.
GE.
Yeah.
Right. We talked about all that and the implications of that. Yeah.
Something with the GE.
Those are
Right.
very important things to consider, for sure. Jared, I didn't give you a chance yet. I want to hear about your report and find out, is there a level playing field with people who get extra time on tests? Let's
Right.
back up and explain to our audience who may not understand why some people do get extra time to
Well,
complete their exams.
Some people are granted a 504, which is something for students who have a disability that disables them from retaining information, learning at the same pace or the same way as other students in their class or the district. So 504 grants them any resources or information they need to kind of balance out and level the playing field for their disability. So extra time is one of those accommodations that students can get to level the playing field. And we wanted to investigate if extra time was being handed out too easily and if it was being taken advantage of, by students and parents across the district.
Okay. How many students, we'll say at Mamaroneck High School, get extra time? Were you allowed to?
Well, we asked about that to one of the upper administration, and he didn't have exact numbers, but it was definitely, he gave us a range, and I forget exactly the number he said, but it was lower than we expected. And I was surprised by that. I thought it was actually higher, but it was lower than I would have expected. I think it was around
1,200?
Yeah.
1,200.
Yeah.
whole district?
In the whole
1,200
district.
for the whole district.
The whole
Oh.
district.
For the entire
The
district?
entire
Right, for the
district.
entire
And
district.
about how many students are there in the entire district?
50.
54, 5,800.
Yeah.
Don't quote me, but
Okay,
Something like that.
approximately.
approximately,
Okay.
Yeah. So it was definitely smaller than I thought
Okay.
going into this.
And how would certain students getting extra time on tests affect the district or the students?
Well, most tests you have, the amount of the period you have, you can finish that test in. And I know that I don't have a 504. My partner Becca also doesn't have a 504. So we've both been in situations where we could have used extra time, and we felt that it was kind of unfair that some people were staying behind. So what it does is having extra time allows you. Sorry, what was the question again?
it can allow for, it's hard to read because, again, this is an accommodation for a disability.
Right.
But the perception of it, because a lot of students or the community may not understand all of that, is something that Jared and his partner wanted to make clear, clarify, but also try to reveal in terms of what students are able to receive in their class and what they're not able to receive. And the big issue that they tackled was we're in a very affluent district.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to talk about that a little
Sure.
bit? Yeah.
If money plays a role in getting it, because there's a lot of parents who have the time and the money and the resources to collect more information, get more doctor's reports, and go to more counselors and pay the extra money to have a psychiatrist, give a different diagnosis on their kid, and that could lead to getting a 504, while someone else who's full-time job and doesn't have the money to do that kind of stuff, they can't do it. So.
But yet, there is a COH, I believe it's called, Committee on the Handicap, or
Right.
something.
There is a committee that
So anybody can convene that to allow their child, and that's provided by the
right.
district.
Absolutely.
So you're saying because some people can afford extra reports and
Well,
psychiatrist
anybody
reports.
can have could bring a case forward that their student needs a 504, but not everyone could find the right documentation to
see.
convince the board that they actually do need a 504.
So have you found that it's a high bar for getting that kind of accommodation?
Absolutely. I've found that it's not easy to get a 504. So I was wrong there that it's not easy, but you can go back time and time and again until you have enough documentation to eventually get a 504.
Critical point. You said, I was wrong. Well, but I think that's an important part of being a good investigative reporter, to know when your biases are being dispelled, when
Absolutely.
the proof is that your original presumption was maybe not correct. Have you found that? I want to know how you define the scope of your project. Did Mr. Madin, I'll start with you, Julia, did Mr. Madin help you define how you were going to go about researching or investigating?
Oh, yeah, definitely. We were kind of all over the place when we first started. So, and we've never done this before. So having Mr. Madin to kind of narrow down what we needed to do and who we needed to talk to kind of helped a lot in making sure that our project was one cohesive thing instead of 10 different angles all over the place. One thing we focus on is our angle and specifically what we want to talk about. So having that going as we move along, I think definitely helps make our project more clear.
Rena, do you have a specific length of time within which to do the project?
Yeah, so we started, when did you leave? October? It was early October when
October.
it was introduced.
October 13th, October 8th or something.
Yeah, it was definitely
Remember
early.
Thank you for that.
And what time was it?
Right.
It's
6
p.m.
p.m.
Exactly.
12:15 maybe?
Thank you.
Made an influence
very
on you.
It's been since early October, I guess, October 8th.
And we're talking today on December 6th, so it's
Yeah.
been about 2 months.
Yeah, and our deadline is fast approaching. So Tuesday, it should be finished. But we've had to kind of get everything together, get all of our interviews, like outside sources as well as people in the school. So it definitely, time went by a lot faster than I think we all thought.
Jared, what do you think about how much time do you spend on the project?
Well, I spend definitely a lot of time because all three of us are also executive editors. So as well as doing our own projects, we have to edit and make sure the other people in our team who are also doing similar projects are up to date and are doing their work timely and promptly.
And then what's the form of the report that students need to submit to you?
So it's written in terms of a script that they will put together,
Okay.
but they are making phone calls and doing a lot of grunt work, but they are putting it all together into an audio project. So the whole point of it is that we want it to sound like an investigative report on NPR. That's the hallmark, that's the point. And we listened to a couple samples of that too, but they're learning how to sound edit, they're learning how to balance sound, they're learning how to put together something for an audience, but they are writing and reporting at the same time, and then they're learning how to use sound at the same time too.
Okay, so they're both using the technical skills that a reporter needs
Yeah.
these days, as well as the original craft of writing and being able to communicate. Do you find it's helpful to have to write out your scripts?
Otherwise, I'd have no idea what to say.
Do you find you learn as you write?
Yeah, you have to, well, because then once you write it all out, like you see a story being made. Otherwise, if you just had to think about it and like then say it and then put it all together, then you wouldn't really know where you're going with it. But when you have a script, you have an introduction, have your story, you have a conclusion, and then you have your interviews throughout. Like it's just more clear for the whole thing.
Okay, I think, have you all felt that way, that you've had
Absolutely.
to, writing really makes a
Absolutely.
difference? Evan, how many projects are going on in your class?
What is it, 4 per team?
No, I have 3.
Yeah, no, it's
11?
there's about, I think 11 total. And really fascinating stuff from local things that are happening in the building to national issues too.
What are some of the other subjects that are being covered?
Well, you know what, they all know.
Oh, okay.
They have their teams, so they can tell you.
Well, our project is about bullying. Then there's another group of my team that's doing immigration in Westchester and whether or not the district is welcoming to immigration, especially with all the DACA stuff that's been going on in the news. And then my other team is doing, which is like specific to the high school, mostly is about juuling. If you like
Dueling?
juuling, it's the
E-cigarettes.
like e-cigarettes.
oh,
Yeah,
oh.
sorry.
Okay.
So they're just doing like the health effects of that, who's using it, why are you using it, how much does it cost, that whole, just like basically everything about it, because it's kind of like a new thing that people don't really know that much about.
Okay, other subjects?
Yeah, a girl is doing one on the New York Constitutional Convention that they just voted on.
Which didn't happen?
Yeah, which they voted on and said no. So I think that's more of a wider scope of an audience. And also another one that was really interesting is about college applications and whether or not people are being fully truthful about what they say, since we're all applying to college. It's a stressful time. So whether or not, like, if you put you're the president of a random club that doesn't exist, like things like that. So they're getting into contact with what's his name? A kid who actually lied on an application and got into a school. But it was like big news, so they went deeper into that. So I thought that was really interesting also.
How about your team, Jared?
Well, one group is doing a story on a new gun store that just opened up in Harrison, and they've found that no one wants to talk about it, and they've been kicked out of the gun store multiple times. They've talked to politicians in Harrison and people in Harrison, and they've had some trouble finding hard evidence on if people like it or people don't like it. So it's a very interesting story they're doing. Another group is talking about college admissions too, and the college admissions process. If it's what are the
Kind of if it's
more-
slanted toward those who are more affluent,
right?
or is it a disadvantage to those who don't have, let's say, a higher income?
Wow, that's a big subject to research.
Yeah.
And the students have,
There's a lot going
on.
have the resources to do that?
And then there's one more on Puerto Rico, right?
Yeah. Well, about they're doing the Hurricane Maria just hit Puerto Rico, and now everyone's realizing how much devastation is going on there with the economy and everything. But they're talking about how how bad was the economy before and why was nobody talking about it. So it's interesting.
Fascinating subjects. Evan, did you give the children a list of subjects, or did they generate those ideas on their own?
Last year, the whole topic was we had finished being on the campaign trail for the election. So I did a whole project on food last year. So they picked like things about food and nutrition that they didn't realize. But this year, I opened it up to everything, and I think it was fabulous. They picked things that they are passionate about. If they're not passionate about it, then they don't want to look into it. Right?
Sounds right. We have only a minute left. I'd like to know what the value of collaboration is on investigative reporting. I've heard each of you mention your partner. Julia, how important is it to be working with a partner on an investigative report?
Well, it definitely makes it a lot easier and lightens the workload a bit, but also I think if you're in an interview with someone and you ask a question and then they ask a question that you didn't even think of, you get an answer that maybe would like help further your project, but you wouldn't have gotten it if they weren't there too. And it just kind of, it's like two sets of eyes, two different minds like collaborating on the same thing. So whatever you thought your project might be, it comes out totally different because you have someone else working on it with you.
Very interesting. How about you, Rena?
I think what Julia said, like it's really good to have somebody to bounce ideas off of and like kind of think of things you wouldn't have thought of before, and especially having somebody next to you in an interview, which is incredibly stressful. So I think it's definitely good to have a partner or even a small group to work with.
Okay, Jared, has your experience been also productive?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's been great to have a partner, but definitely sometimes you feel like you only want to do it your way, and then you realize maybe a day later that maybe they were right, and so it's good to have that second pair of eyes.
Okay. So how many investigative reporters will we get from this project? You're all thinking of futures in journalism?
Possibly.
Maybe. We'll see.
Do you think it will inform your college work?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say so.
I mean, what have you learned? What skill do you think you are coming away from this with that will really enhance your college experience or your work experience?
Being able to talk to people, like interviewing has definitely helped with like coming up with questions, who to interview, setting that up. It's just like, I guess it's more of like a confidence thing. That's honestly what it's taught me, is reaching out to people, like adults and like big name people kind of, and having to talk to them and sit through an interview with them is
Rena,
stressful.
second, lightning round.
Yeah.
What have you learned?
I mean, I think I definitely became better at setting deadlines. Since we are all executive editors, we have to make sure we're on top of things, and so are other people. So having like a calendar with deadlines is definitely I'm going to take with me.
Okay, Jared, last word.
Yeah, keeping a deadline and definitely being on point with what I have to do, what I have to keep up with, and how I have to get to the next step.
Great. Well, I'm very impressed with all of you, I must say, and I look forward to your reports. Thank you so much for sharing it with us.
Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you.
And I look forward to talking with you again.
Thank you.
And to my viewers at home, thanks so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. I'm Alice Bloom. We'll see you next time.